These traits of success isolate you from the herd, even if you toe the line and play your cards right. So it is valuable to know when to blend in, when to adapt to your surroundings, to know the enemies that surround you, to know those who would not support you if you needed support. It is fundamentally essential to know where you lay in any situation and plan for every contingency. But even your best laid plans won't protect you from the ire of the herd. Okay? The herd will always isolate you because you are the black sheep. You are the successful, focused, determined, conscious man who is observant and who is reactive to his surroundings. The majority of people can't even entertain these concepts. So naturally, they will try to isolate you, separate you, because you are a reflection of their failures. Every time they look at you, they see a reflection of everything they're not doing in their own lives. They're seeing everything they could be doing. All of their wasted potential is manifested in you. And so naturally, even if you're friends with them, even if you're cordial, they'll have that nagging discomfort in the back of their head, a constant reminder of their failures when you are in their presence. So no matter what you do, you are the black sheep. So learn to embrace it. Embrace it. Because you would never want to be a part of the herd. The herd is doomed to stampeding off the cliff. They are surrounded by constant reaffirmations of all of their mistakes and all of their shortcomings. That they live in a realm of fantasy, a realm that cannot exist for the successful, self-thinking man. You defined your own concept of success. Happiness is not derived from anything given to you. You create it yourself. We're heading into some really bad times from my observations. I remember when this first started, I was on the TFM show and I was talking with Sandman about the initial COVID lockdowns. And I said that regardless of whether or not COVID proves to be lethal or not, the lockdowns, the martial law procedures will stay. And that is the measure of 2020. I forget the guy's name, but he said, never let a crisis go to waste.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before. I think America as a whole in 1973 and 1974, and not just my view, but obviously the administration, missed the opportunity to deal with the energy crisis that was before us. For a long time, our entire energy policy came down to cheap oil. This is an opportunity, what used to be long-term problems, be they in the healthcare area, energy area, education area, fiscal area, tax area, regulatory reform area, things that we had postponed for too long that were long-term are now immediate and must be dealt with.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
You've seen firsthand how readily people give up their freedoms, how quickly the sheep is pressured into submission. And it's only going to get worse from here. It's not going to end until people put an end to it. And as we know, the herd is comfortable when it's fed, sheltered, entertained. And as long as those three criteria are met, this martial law is not going to end. And so now you are on your own. You are the isolated black sheep. Because if you want to prosper, not just survive, not just scrape by, not just make it by, if you want to prosper now, you need to be inventive, creative, ambitious, dedicated. Things that these other people can't be. So it's forced the black sheep to be more readily available. You can quickly spot the people who are not in the herd. And the ironic thing is, when you find someone like that out in the wild, you're not going to really relate to them as much because they're doing their own thing. You may be able to open up a bit if they're open to conversation, but you're on your own. You're your own black sheep. There is no cavalry coming to help you. This is the end game of the herd. The most common mistake I see is one that I made when I first discovered all this stuff. You want to share the information, the knowledge, the examples out of goodwill. You want the best for those around you. You're not trying to show off or stroke your ego. You're trying out of goodwill to help your fellow man. You want to show them all these things that helped your life, that helped you cope with the new reality that you've seen, and to show them the things that they're glossing over. And it's the number one mistake, and almost everybody makes it. So it's okay if you've done it, but you have to look at the reasons why you're doing it. And that goodwill can't be extended to the herd if they can't even accept it to begin with, because they're not ready for it. So every time you try to open up and help someone still plugged in, someone still not seeing what's right in front of them, you're putting yourself at risk. And really, if you think about it, you're doing more of a disservice to that person still plugged in because they're not ready for it. So when you're giving them information they're not ready for, they're going to dismiss it out of hand and never reconcile with the information again. Versus if you let them come to it on their own and guide them, then they're more suggestive to accepting the things they were not open to before. Because let's face it, let's look at the state of the game 2020. If you can't see the things that's happening right in front of you, you know, on a spectrum of topics, women, now look at the development of OnlyFans. Was OnlyFans this year or was it last year? I know it's very recent. So it was either this year it started becoming really popular or the end of last year. But the open prostitution of your average female. I mean, how much more decadent could our culture get when you have OnlyFans being propped up by the youth of today? You can't. I mean, how much further does the rabbit hole go when it's in your face like that? In your face. You know, the open acknowledgement of the existence of the deep state. You know, people who tried to deny its existence before, we've had their playbooks. We've had their white papers. You can go read Operation Lockstep. You can read UN Agenda 2030. You can go look at research for the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove. There's so much research out there, and you're backed by your research, your white papers, and people deny it until it's in their face. You can no longer deny it. You know, if they steal an election right in front of your face, what are you going to do? There's no more denying. But the herd will find a way to circumvent the work that is required when facing these hard truths. Because to face this reality, it changes you. It fundamentally changes you as a person. And you have to adapt or die. Truly. Because falling into that void of hopelessness, of defeatism, of aimlessness, is a death of the ego. It is a death of the self. And you have to come out of that with a purpose, with a renewed strength, and a desire to prosper in the face of it. And it's tremendously difficult. It is a man's challenge. That is his challenge. That is his great task, is to restructure himself, to confront his realities, and to overcome them. That is the greatest test of a man. And so many men are struggling with it today. It's an ongoing process. And the sheep will do everything in their power to not face that. Because they don't need to. They have no higher purpose. They have no goals outside of hedonism, outside of day-to-day animalistic urges. So to rely on them to change anything is to wait in vain. And we'll see how far the herd will tumble off this cliff over the next year. I have a feeling it's going to get very bad. I'll try to start pulling up documents and reviewing what is coming, what has come so far, and where we can predict where it's going. But there's so much stuff out there. It'll be quite extensive. But just know that, knowing this stuff about not only female nature, but it extends so much more beyond that, because then you start wondering, yes, female nature is corruptible, but then how did it get to this point today? How did it get so bad? And once you start asking questions like that, the rabbit hole goes all the way down. And, it is exciting. It is a good time for those who are willing to do a little research, because you have communities where we can talk when you don't feel like the crazy person anymore, because you're seeing it firsthand. You have support networks. But for the sheep, they have no bearing on reality. They have no answers. They don't even have questions. They don't have the right questions. So they're just wandering aimlessly, and that's not something I would wish on my worst enemy, is to be stuck in that haze of confusion. So cherish being the black sheep. Cherish your isolation from the herd, because you don't want to be in there to begin with. There's nothing in there for you. That conformity doesn't bring comfort. It doesn't. Because you can't shut that inner voice off in yourself. You shut that inner voice off, you have nothing. And that's what it requires to be in the herd. You have to shut that inner voice off. And once it's awoken, you can't do that. The guilt that would haunt you for turning away from your potential would be infinitely worse than bearing the weight of any isolation you may feel outside of the herd. So until the next video, guys, stay safe. I'll see you soon.